Can you imagine the sting of betrayal when a teacher, someone meant to uplift young hearts, instead crushes a child's spirit in front of his peers? Picture this: 11-year-old Malik Rivers, a black boy with a spark of pride in his eyes, bravely sharing that his father is none other than Vin Diesel, the action star adored by millions, but to Malik, just dad. What should have been a moment of celebration turned into a nightmare of laughter, sneers, and cruel disbelief. His teacher, Mrs. Bishop, with her sharp gaze and sharper tongue, didn't just dismiss his words, she turned his identity into a cruel joke, all because his skin didn't fit the picture they painted in their narrow minds. How could someone entrusted with shaping young minds do this? The class joined in, mocking him, while the adults stood by, silent. But oh, when the truth strutted through that classroom door in the most jaw-dropping way, the quiet prejudice lurking in the shadows was exposed for all to see. Justice doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers, but when it speaks, everyone listens. The morning air in Greenville, South Carolina hung thick and heavy, as if the humidity carried secrets too heavy to voice. Malik Rivers stood nervously at the curb outside their modest brick house, fidgeting with the straps of his worn backpack. His mother, Tasha, knelt before him, her hands gently checking his shoelaces one last time, her eyes filled with that unspoken worry only a mother knows when sending her black son into a world that might not welcome him. "You're smart, you're kind, and you belong, Malik," she whispered, her voice soft but fierce. Malik nodded, but deep down he wasn't so sure. Could he really belong in a place like this? He'd been the new kid before twice, in fact, but Greenville felt different, colder somehow. Their new neighborhood was eerily quiet, too quiet. On the day they moved in, an elderly white couple across the street stopped mowing their lawn to stare, their eyes lingering too long. A woman nearby yanked her child inside without so much as a wave or a smile. It wasn't outright hatred, but it was suspicion, as if Malik and his mom had wandered into a story where they didn't belong. The school bus rolled up with a tired hiss and groan, its brakes squealing in the morning stillness. As Malik climbed aboard, the chatter inside hushed, just enough to make his stomach twist. Dozens of unfamiliar eyes flicked toward him, sizing him up in silence before turning back to their conversations. No one scooted over to make room, really. Why would they? He shuffled to a seat near the back, clutching his bag to his chest like a shield, and stared out the window, watching the world blur past. Brookside Middle School was pristine, with cheerful banners proclaiming character counts and neatly trimmed mulch circling the flagpole. But as Malik navigated the crowded halls toward his homeroom, a familiar chill settled over him, one that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Smiles were scarce. Instead, he got half glances, quick looks that judged him and dismissed him in one swift motion. Was he invisible, or was he just not worth seeing? In room 208 Mrs. Bishop stood by the whiteboard, her posture rigid, her salt and pepper bob perfectly curled under her ears. She glanced up from her attendance sheet as Malik entered, her tight-lipped smile never reaching her sharp eyes, hidden behind reading glasses. "Class," she announced, barely looking at him. "We have a new student. This is Malik." Her tone was flat, as if his name was an afterthought. "Malik," he corrected softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Right. From Atlanta," she said, already turning back to the board, dismissing him with a flick of her wrist. "Find a seat, please." "Colin, scoot over!" The blond boy by the window. Colin didn't budge until she snapped his name again. He shot Malik a sideways glance, wrinkled his nose like he smelled something bad, and shoved his backpack aside with a dramatic sigh, as if sharing space was the worst chore imaginable. Can you believe the nerve? Malik settled into his seat, folding his hands tightly, focusing on breathing evenly to calm the nerves fluttering in his chest. He tried so hard to blend in, to follow the lesson, to raise his hand when he knew an answer. But every time he did, Mrs. Bishop's eyes slid right past him, never calling on him, not once. When he answered a question correctly during group work, she gave a curt nod. Nothing more. No praise. No warmth. But Colin? Oh, Colin got it all: warm smiles when he stumbled, gentle corrections when he was wrong, and loud, glowing praise when he got even the smallest thing right. The favoritism was so blatant, it stung. By lunchtime, Malik felt the divide like a wall between him and everyone else. He didn't even try to talk to anyone. He wandered the cafeteria with his tray, scanning for an open seat, but the second he approached a table, kids shifted away, whispered, or claimed the spot was taken. He ended up alone in the farthest corner, picking at his sandwich while laughter and cliques buzzed around him. He caught his name once, followed by snickers. He didn't look up. Why give them the satisfaction? The week crawled by, each day a painful rehearsal for invisibility. Malik didn't want to make waves or be labeled as trouble, but the ache in his chest grew heavier. At home, when Tasha asked how his day went, he mumbled fine and fled to his room, shutting the door on the world. She didn't push, though her eyes searched his face for answers. Maybe she knew, maybe she didn't, but her words echoed in his heart. Don't ever let the world convince you you're smaller than you are. Those words were his lifeline, a reminder to hold on to who he was, no matter what. Then, on Monday morning, Miss S. Bishop stood at the front of the class, her voice cutting through the chatter. Next Friday will be our annual Career Hero Day. Each of you will prepare a short presentation about someone in your family, ideally a parent or grandparent, and tell us what they do and why they inspired you. The room erupted in excited chatter. My mom's a nurse, one kid shouted. My dad builds houses, another chimed in. My aunt's a pilot. Malik sat up straighter, a flicker of hope igniting in his chest. For the first time since arriving, he felt something stir, a spark of possibility. He knew exactly what he was going to say, and it filled him with a quiet pride. That night, in the corner of their sparsely decorated bedroom, Malik knelt by his bed and pulled out a worn shoebox, its edges frayed from years of love. Inside were treasures, birthday cards with faded ink, a creased letter, and a single photograph he'd been told to keep private. In the photo, a younger Vin Diesel, real name Mark Sinclair, cradled a swaddled baby, his hand resting protectively on the child's back. His smile wasn't for the cameras, it was for his son Malik. As Malik traced his fingers over the glossy surface, memories flooded back. His mother had shared the truth years ago. The world-famous actor had once been part of their lives, a presence in their home before fame's spotlight forced him into the shadows, where secrets became necessary. There were no tabloid headlines, no public claims, but there were phone calls, letters, and visits until the paparazzi started sniffing around, and those moments stopped. Yet Malik could still hear his father's deep, kind voice. You're stronger than people know. How could he forget that? All week, Malik poured his heart into his speech. He wrote and rewrote, practiced in front of the mirror, striving to make his voice steady, his words crystal clear. My dad's name is Mark Sinclair, but the world knows him as Vin Diesel, he rehearsed. He's my hero because even when he became famous, he didn't forget me. He told me to be proud, to stand tall, and to never be ashamed of who I am. Tasha watched from the hallway, her eyes soft with a mix of pride and sadness. She never told him to stop, but she didn't urge him on either. Tell the truth, Malik, she said quietly, but be ready if they don't believe it. Her words hung in the air, a warning and a promise. On Thursday, the day before the big presentation, Malik carefully slipped the precious photo into a plastic sleeve and tucked it into his folder, handling it like a fragile treasure. At recess, while other kids ran and played, he stayed behind, reviewing his notes, determined to get every word right. That's when Colin and two of his buddies sauntered over, their smirks spelling trouble. So, Colin said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, who are you going to say your dad is tomorrow? LeBron? Obama? His tone dripped with mockery. Malik looked up, calm but firm, and said, "Vin Diesel." For a split second, there was silence. Then the laughter exploded, not just from Colin's crew, but from other kids who'd overheard. Colin grinned like he'd won a prize. "Vin Diesel? You're joking, right, bro? Look at you. He's white, and you're..." He laughed harder, cruelly. "You're like the exact opposite." Another boy piled on. "Maybe your mom wishes he was your dad." The words cut deep, and Malik's ears burned. He clenched his fists, his heart pounding not with anger, but with a shame he didn't deserve. As they walked away, still cackling, he pulled out the photo and stared at it. His father's smile was still there, warm and real, but it felt distant now, fragile, like something the world around him couldn't handle. For the first time, he wondered, was telling the truth worth all this pain? Friday morning dawned heavy with a tension Malik couldn't name. The sky outside his window was a dull gray, clouds hanging low, as if the weather itself was holding its breath. He dressed carefully, smoothing the wrinkles from the button-up shirt Tasha had ironed with love the night before. He checked his backpack 3 times, ensuring the photo, safe in its plastic sleeve, was still there. Standing before the mirror, he rehearsed his lines one last time, whispering to himself, "Today's the day everything changes." On the school bus, the usual hush greeted him, whispers darting from row to row. Someone near the front muttered "Hollywood faker" under their breath, but Malik clenched his jaw and ignored it. Today, he had proof. Today, his truth would outshine their doubts. In room 208, Miss S. Bishop was already organizing the presentation order, her eyes skimming over Malik with that same cold indifference. He sat by the window, steadying his breathing, his heart racing with anticipation. One by one, his classmates took the stage. A girl beamed with pride about her mom, a local dentist. A boy grinned as he shared how his dad worked in construction. Then Colin strutted up, his voice booming with confidence as he bragged about his father, head coach of Greenville High's football team. The class clapped wildly, and Miss S. Bishop smiled at him like he was her own grandson. Then it was Malik's turn. His legs trembled as he stood, but he walked to the front with purpose, his heart thumping in his ears. He placed the photo carefully on Miss S. Bishop's desk, next to his neatly written notes. A few kids snickered, and Colin leaned back, arms crossed, grinning like he was waiting for a punchline. Malik took a deep breath. "My name is Malik Rivers," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "And my hero is my dad, Mark Sinclair, but you probably know him as Vin Diesel." The class didn't wait. The laughter erupted, loud, cruel, and unstoppable. Malik froze, his words caught in his throat. Colin slapped his desk, laughing so hard tears streamed down his face. "You've got to be kidding me. Vin Diesel? Bro, do you even own a mirror?" he jeered. Malik tried to push forward, but Miss S. Bishop raised a hand, silencing the room. The laughter faded, but the smirks lingered. She looked at Malik, her face unreadable, then sighed a sigh that carried more judgment than words ever could. "Malik," she said, her tone dripping with condescension, "let's not turn this into a fantasy exercise. Career Hero Day is about real people in your life, not celebrities you see on TV. Can you imagine the humiliation?" Malik's face paled, his voice faltering. "But he is my dad. I have." "That's enough," she snapped, her voice sharp and final. "You're not here to play pretend. Sit down." The room fell silent, but it wasn't the silence of support. It was heavy, suffocating, awkward. Malik's hands trembled as he picked up his photo and shuffled back to his seat, his eyes fixed on the floor. No one looked at him, not even the kids who'd laughed the loudest. His name was now a joke, his truth denied not by his peers, but by the adult who was supposed to protect him. How could she? After class, as kids spilled into the hallway, Colin sauntered by and muttered, "Maybe next time, pick someone more believable." His laugh echoed as he vanished into the crowd. Malik skipped lunch, retreating to the library, where he sat hunched over an empty notebook, staring at the photo like it was a relic from a world no one here could understand. He didn't cry, didn't move. When the final bell rang, he walked home in silence, the hum of passing cars barely registering. Tasha was in the kitchen, chopping onions, her radio playing softly. She turned as he entered, her smile fading when she saw his face. Without a word, he handed her his crumpled speech in the photo, then retreated to his room, the weight of the day too heavy to carry alone. That night, long after Malik had gone to bed, Tasha sat at the kitchen table, reading his speech word by word. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She opened the old shoebox, pulling out not just memories, but truths the world refused to accept. Staring at the photo, she made a decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a deep voice answered. "Hello? Mark." "It's Tasha," she said, her voice steady but tight. A pause. "Is he okay?" "No," she replied. "They called him a liar, his teacher, the kids all because he told the truth." Silence stretched on the other end. "I'll be there tomorrow," he said finally. "Tell him he did the right thing." And with that, a plan was set in motion that would change everything. Can you imagine the weight of a child's heart when the world refuses to believe his truth? Picture Tasha in the kitchen, the sharp scent of onions mingling with the soft hum of her radio, chopping away as her son, Malik, shuffles through the door. One look at his face, oh, that hollow, defeated expression, and her heart sinks. He doesn't say a word, just hands her his crumpled speech, the paper creased from his tight grip, and the precious photo of him as a baby in his father's arms. Without a sound, he turns and trudges to his room, the weight of the day's humiliation pressing down on his small shoulders. What kind of world does this to an 11-year-old boy? That night, long after Malik's breathing steadies in sleep, Tasha sits alone at the kitchen table, her fingers trembling as she unfolds his speech. She reads every word, each one a piece of her son's heart poured onto the page. Her eyes brim with tears, but she refuses to let them fall, crying, "Won't fix this." Instead, she reaches for the old shoebox, its edges worn from years of quiet reverence. Inside aren't just memories, there are truths the world has stubbornly refused to accept. She pulls out the photo again, staring at the image of a younger Vin Diesel, known to the world as a Hollywood titan, but to Malik as Dad, cradling her baby boy with a smile so tender it could break your heart. How could anyone doubt this bond? Tasha's jaw tightens, and she grabs her phone, dialing a number she's kept for years, but never dared to use. It rings twice, each second stretching into eternity before a deep voice answers. "Hello? Mark." "It's Tasha," she says, her voice calm but laced with steel. A pause then. "Is he okay?" "No," she replies, her words sharp with pain. "They called him a liar, his teacher. The kids all because he told the truth." Silence hangs heavy on the line, thick with unspoken regret. "I'll be there tomorrow," Mark says finally, his voice firm. Tell him he did the right thing." And just like that, a spark of hope ignites in the darkness. The next morning, Malik is a shadow of himself, silent as he trudges to school, his eyes fixed on the ground. The halls of Brookside Middle School swallow him whole, and he moves through them as if invisible. No one laughs now. Perhaps the shame of watching a boy be publicly torn down has finally sunk in. Or maybe they've just tired of their cruel joke. Either way, their averted gazes cut just as deep. Why won't they look at him? In homeroom, Miss S. Bishop carries on as if nothing happened, her face a mask of indifference. She doesn't mention the previous day's cruelty, doesn't acknowledge the wound she inflicted. She just hands out worksheets and retreats to her desk, business as usual. But Malik sees through her facade. Something inside him has shifted, a crack in the part of him that once trusted adults to always be fair. What spills out isn't anger, but a piercing clarity he knows now that grown-ups can be wrong, terribly wrong. At 9:17 a.m., a sharp knock at the door slices through Mrs. Bishop's droning lesson. She pauses mid-sentence, her brow furrowing in surprise. The door creaks open slowly and a tall figure steps inside, clad in a dark gray hoodie and jeans. The room freezes. Time itself seems to hold its breath. The kids stare, some gasping aloud. It's him! Vin Diesel, larger than life, stands in their classroom, his presence commanding yet calm. He doesn't speak right away, his eyes sweeping the room, taking in every face until they land on Malik, who sits frozen, lips parted in disbelief. A soft smile curves Vin's lips, and he strides to the front of the class. "I believe," he says, his voice steady but powerful, "there's been some confusion. Can you feel the electricity in the air?" Mrs. Bishop scrambles to her feet, blinking rapidly, her composure unraveling. "Mr. Diesel, I didn't expect," she stammers. "No," he cuts her off, turning to face her, his tone unwavering. "I imagine you didn't. Because you didn't believe him. Because my son doesn't look like me. Because, in your mind, the color of his skin made his truth impossible." Her mouth opens, but no words come out, her voice trapped in her throat. The room is silent, but it's not just shock, it's heavier, laden with guilt, recognition, a slow, painful awakening. Vin turns back to Malik, his eyes softening. "You didn't lie," he says, his words a lifeline. "You told your story, and you should never, never be ashamed of that." Then he addresses the class, his voice resonating with authority. "This young man is my son, not because he looks like me, not because of fame, but because he is mine. And the truth doesn't need permission to be spoken." The students sit wide-eyed, their laughter long gone, replaced by stunned silence. And Mrs. Bishop, her head bows, her lips trembling, the weight of her prejudice crashing down on her like a tidal wave. How could she have been so blind? The silence that follows Vin Diesel's words isn't just quiet, it transforms the room, rewriting the air itself. The kids who mocked Malik, who whispered behind his back and laughed in his face, now sit frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief and discomfort. They're witnessing something they never imagined. A man they've seen on movie screens standing tall, defending a truth they'd so easily dismissed, a truth that didn't fit their narrow expectations. Malik remains still at his desk, a whirlwind of emotions flickering across his face: relief, confusion, pride, and something deeper, a tender spark that's been buried under days of shame. Mrs. Bishop stands behind her desk, her fingers twitching nervously against the table's edge, her gaze fixed on the floor. For the first time in years, she's speechless, her usual confidence shattered. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? Vin's eyes find her again, his voice calm but heavy with truth. "You looked at my son and decided, without evidence, that he couldn't be who he said he was. You judged him not by his words, not by his courage, but by the color of his skin." She opens her mouth, desperate for a defense, but there's nothing to say because there's no excuse. "If Malik had been white," Vin continues, his words cutting through the silence, "would you have laughed? Would you have called him a liar in front of his classmates? Or would you have believed him, simply because his skin matched the image you had in your mind?" No one moves, no one dares breathe. He turns to the students, his voice steady but fierce. "Let me tell you something. Families don't all look the same. Love doesn't follow a single color. And truth? Truth doesn't have a face. It doesn't need permission from your expectations. It stands on its own. Something stirs in Malik, a strength that outshines all the shame he's carried. He rises slowly, his knees shaky but his heart steady, and walks to the front of the classroom to stand beside his father. The room, once so cold and dismissive, now watches him with wide eyes and uneasy silence. "I didn't come here to brag," Malik says, his voice quiet but clear, ringing with conviction. "I didn't say my dad was Vin Diesel because I wanted attention. I said it because it's the truth, but nobody believed me because of how I look. Because you thought someone like me doesn't deserve someone like him. He looks straight at Mrs. Bishop, and for the first time, she meets his gaze. There's no defiance in her eyes now, only shame, raw and undeniable. My skin doesn't make my story less true, Malik declares, and I shouldn't have to prove who I am just to be treated with respect. A long, heavy pause follows, the air thick with the power of his words. Then Vin places a gentle hand on his son's shoulder, his voice soft but proud. You were brave, Malik, and I am so proud of you. Can you feel the triumph in that moment? The bell rings, but no one moves. The moment is too raw, too real. Later that afternoon, the principal calls an emergency meeting with Miss S, Bishop, Tasha, and the school counselor. Tasha arrives in her scrubs, hair pulled back, her eyes clear and unyielding. She listens as the principal fumbles through an explanation, calling it a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. But Tasha isn't having it. My son was publicly humiliated, she says, her voice steady but fierce, not by accident, but by assumption. He wasn't just doubted, he was dismissed because he's black, because his story didn't match what you thought was believable. Miss S. Bishop sits in silence, her usual confidence shattered. Finally, she speaks, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I should have listened. I should have trusted him. Tasha pauses, her eyes narrowing, then says, You owe my son more than a private apology. The principal nods, and it's decided Miss S. Bishop will address the entire school at Monday's assembly. Justice is coming. That weekend, Malik doesn't retreat to his room. He helps Tasha cook dinner, the kitchen filled with the warm aroma of spices and laughter. They watch movies together, and for the first time in days, Malik's smile returns, tentative but real. Vin stays in town through Sunday, taking Malik to the local park where they kick a soccer ball under the spring sun. They talk about everything: movies, music, life, and what it means to be truly seen. Not as a celebrity's son, but as a whole person. Malik looks up at his father and asks, Why didn't you ever go public about me? Vin pauses, his eyes softening with regret. I thought I was protecting you, he says honestly. I didn't want you caught up in the chaos of fame, but maybe I was just protecting myself. Malik nods, his voice quiet but firm. I don't need people to know. I just needed someone to believe me. And in that moment, they understand each other completely. Monday morning, the school auditorium buzzes with anticipation, students and teachers packed in, whispering about what's to come. Mrs. Bishop steps onto the stage, her hands clasped tightly, her face tense but resolute. She approaches the microphone and takes a deep breath. Last week, during Career Hero Day, I made a mistake, she begins, her voice trembling. A serious mistake. I doubted a student's words based on my own assumptions. I let prejudice unspoken but real guide my reaction, and I hurt someone who trusted me. I am deeply sorry. She turns to Malik, seated in the front row beside Tasha. Malik, I hope you can forgive me. And I hope everyone in this room learns from what happened. We must do better, all of us. A pause. Then applause starts, soft at first, then swelling into a powerful wave. Malik feels heat rise to his face, not from shame, but from the overwhelming power of being seen not as a joke, but as someone whose truth matters. Can you imagine the relief? In the days that follow, the air at Brookside Middle shifts, subtle but undeniable. Colin stops sneering when he passes Malik in the hall. Some kids who once laughed now offer shy waves or small smiles. Malik doesn't become the most popular kid overnight, but he becomes visible, his presence no longer ignored. His story, once mocked, has pierced through ignorance, cracking the shell of casual racism and forcing the school to face the quiet ways prejudice creeps in nemesis. Bishop changes too. She asks Malik to help create a classroom project on identity and truth, inviting students to share their family stories, no matter how complex. Malik agrees, not for attention, but because he knows now that change starts when someone dares to speak first. A month later, the school hosts a community night, a warm gathering of parents, teachers, and students sharing food and stories. Malik stands proudly beside Tasha, introducing Vin Diesel to those who approach not as a star, but as his father, a man who showed up when it mattered most. Vin stays just long enough to shake hands, flash a warm smile, and rest a quiet hand on Malik's back before slipping away. That night, as Malik lies in bed, he stares at the ceiling, replaying everything, the laughter, the shame, the disbelief, but also the moment the door opened and his truth walked in, no longer needing to shout. He stood up, fell, and rose again. In the stillness of his small bedroom, he feels what he's craved all along, not fame, not validation, but dignity. He whispers into the dark, "I'm not just his son. I'm my own person, and that's enough." And it is. Because sometimes the bravest thing a child can do is speak his truth and wait for the world to catch up. Isn't that the essence of courage? My heart aches for the quiet courage of children like Malik, who face a world quick to judge and slow to listen. The story screams a truth we can't ignore: prejudice, even when whispered, wounds deeply. It's infuriating that a teacher meant to nurture could dismiss a boy's identity because his skin didn't match her narrow expectations. How dare we let assumptions steal a child's dignity? This isn't just about race, it's about the human cost of closed minds. We live in a society that claims to value diversity, yet too often we demand conformity, boxing people into rigid molds. Malik's story is a blazing reminder that truth doesn't need permission and love doesn't wear a single color. I'm inspired by his resilience, standing tall despite laughter and shame, and by Tasha's fierce love, refusing to let her son's spirit be crushed. But I'm also enraged. Why does it take a celebrity's presence to make people listen? We must do better, not just in schools, but in every corner of life, dismantling the casual racism that festers in silence. Let's champion stories like Malik's, amplifying voices that demand to be heard. Every child deserves to feel seen, not as a stereotype, but as a person with a story worth believing. Let's live boldly, with open hearts, and fight for a world where truth triumphs over bias.